and I'm going to exercise that right, there's nothing they can do. They cannot arrest a person who's not even identified. They don't know who this person is. Okay? Last thing I want to say, I've had people being given documents to sign, saying, oh, you know, if you sign this, you can go home today, you don't have to worry about it, it's just a simple one-page document. You don't have to sign anything. In fact, this is the one time ignorance is an asset. You say, no English, can't speak English, so I can't read that form, can't sign it. My attorney here would help me sign it. You don't have to. Because what happens is that a lot of the forms that especially the enforcement people have, they are not forms that are designed to help you. They are forms that are designed to take away or minimize their work for them. So it's very easy for you to sign a form that actually takes away, for example, your right to go before an immigration judge. You sign off your rights to essentially fight this thing. And for us as lawyers, it takes a lot more money to now have to deal with a form that you signed. Rather than you refuse to sign it, there's nothing, then we are looking at what does immigration have on you. So it's good advice not to sign anything. Even if they offered it to you, you can say no. All right. Did I go the other way?
Please, one more. No, going backwards now. Last one. There you go.
Okay. And then, of course, the other thing that people, and it's on our card too, the other thing that a lot of people don't know is that while you've watched enough movies to know in criminal cases, people say, yeah, you have a right to an attorney. And that attorney is typically provided by the government, or you don't have to pay for it. In an immigration situation, you still have the right to speak to an attorney, just that it's not an attorney that the government will pay for. So you can say, I would like to speak to my attorney. And they will say, you know that is an attorney that you pay for. And you say, I know that. I'll pay for that attorney. And they will let you do that. If they didn't, then we now have a basis for a lawsuit. If they arrested you, then we have a basis for what's called an habeas corpus application. I'm not going to go into that. But at least knowing what your rights are and exercising them proactively makes our case easier. And it also makes it cheaper for you. Because if I'm going to have to fight immigration on the forms that you already signed or statements that you already made, then it costs us more money. And so what we are trying to do with this presentation is to say, look, you don't have to do this. If they get hold of you, you still have these rights. Exercise them without worry, and if you have any doubt, we are there to help. All right. I went through the rights that you have. These are the sort of the main ones. It doesn't mean you don't have other rights, so I don't want to give you the impression that there may not be others. But these are generally the most important ones that we recommend that our clients, at least at the very minimum, know about. Did I miss something on that?
No.
All right.
So, Henry, I have a question.
Sure.
There's this terminology ICE has been using recently, targeted enforcement. So if they come to me stop me and I say, hey, I'm not talking to you, I'm not identifying myself, and I'm walking away, what do? Will they just let you walk?
I haven't seen a situation where anything else has happened, because what happens is if you don't identify yourself, if you say nothing beyond saying I'm not going to talk, then they have no reason to arrest you because they don't know who you are. So there is a problem with what's called probable cause. What is it? They can't say you're in the country legally because they don't know who you are. You didn't produce any documents. You're just a person walking on Lake Street. Would they arrest anybody just because they're on Lake Street? I don't think they would. Because any good lawyer would beat that down. What happens in most of the cases that turn problematic is we provide them with enough information for what's called probable cause. For example, like the example I gave earlier, if I am the one who's saying I was born in Kenya, then of course they already have one plank of, all right, are you then here without documentation? And if I say, yeah, I came to school and I went to University of Minnesota for one semester and I didn't have any fees and I dropped out, then have you overstayed your F1 status? So I know it's hard to not respond to some person with a badge, but I think that is the safest thing to do. Because then all they would have, if they took you in, then they will have to book you in as John Doe, because you are not identified, are you? You don't have anything on you that says who you are, and you have refused to give them your name, your birth date, your birthplace, and why you are here. Then it's up to them to explain why they arrested you. Did they arrest you because you look different? Do you look different from other Americans? So that gives us ammunition to fight the arrest itself. But if you give them these sort of admissions, then it's hard for us to help. I've not heard of a situation where somebody says, I choose to remain silent, and they got arrested. I haven't heard of that. Have you guys? No? It doesn't happen because they can't win. Go ahead.
Another question. Often when ICE approaches someone, they've probably been monitoring that person, but there are also circumstances where you may be in the wrong place at the wrong time, where they were targeting someone else and you happen to be there. Things may not be right as far as papers are concerned, but they also have this fingerprint identification. I forget the name of the thing. If you decide to be quiet, or you don't answer their questions based on the immigration status, can they force you to do the fingerprint?
I don't think anybody can force you to do, because that goes into the Fourth Amendment issue, doesn't it?
This is the same, actually, those rights apply to everybody physically in the United States, whether or not you're a citizen, whether or not your status. And the issue is whether or not there's probable cause to believe that that an offense was committed and that you committed that offense. They cannot do a dragnet and grab everybody in there and ask everybody to identify themselves with their legal status here on the way out. Okay? Now the difficulty is most people are fearful of that, and like Henry said, they start answering questions, they give that information, you've given the government a reason to take you into custody. Okay? If you've done nothing wrong, if you and no one has identified you, and they've not identified you as someone who is here illegally or without status, you simply walk away. It's uncomfortable, but that gives you the best chance to fight the government, because the government has to follow the rules. And if they break the rules, there are remedies. But if you stop and you're fearful of that, and you give them the information they need, if you give them the probable cause, then that means that they're going to take you into custody and they have a reason to hold you. Okay? it's not a sure thing, right? If you're here without status, if you're here, if for instance, you're here on temporary protected status and the president ends that, there's nothing we can do to change that law, to change your status. What we can stop is the government from acting illegally against you. And that's what we're trying to do. Those are the rights that you have, is to not have the government act illegally against you. That's the best we can do as lawyers, is to tell you what those rights are. We should keep going because we're going to run out of time.
Are we?
Yep.
I forgot about it. Thank you, Steve.
Maybe we can just hold questions till the end and then.
Okay, that's a good idea. So why don't we hold questions that people have, then we'll answer them at the end of it. The next phase that I was going to address briefly, and then I'll let Steve come up, is what we think are important pillars of a safety plan should look like. And the things that should be in there are the things that we're going to go very briefly over. The first thing that we think belongs in there is just make sure you have identification. If somebody has documentation that does not belong to them or that's not legal, and here we are being very honest and acknowledging that there are people who have identification or stuff that does not necessarily belong to them. So if you don't have a state-issued ID or driver's license or green card or employment authorization card, the best thing, I mean, as lawyers, we can't tell you what to do which violates the law, but we're saying if you have somebody else's ID, the best thing is not to have it on you. And that's all I'm going to say about that one. The next thing is, we said false, somebody else's, no. The other thing that we think needs to be part of your plan is emergency information. So these are things like who are the people that can be contacted in the event that you get in contact with ICE and they put you in custody. Who are the people that can be contacted? And this becomes important because the way ICE does this is they can pick somebody up from Bloomington, take him to Elk River for one night, and ship him to Mississippi, where they have more beds and where they get more money. I don't think we have time, but I will tell you that this business of arresting and detaining people is actually a business. People are making money from it. So sometimes they would take you to Mississippi because they would get paid more money. The company that runs those things gets more money by having you detained in Mississippi than in Elk River. So having this emergency contact information becomes very critical. Then we know very quickly who we can reach out to and what. So work contacts, trusted friends, I think that's something that should be part of this folder. The other thing is just make sure that if you have a lawyer, make sure that you have their contact with you or you memorize their number. Because as I said, if you are in Elk River, before you go to Mississippi, maybe there's something that can be done before that happens. And we are not promising that would get you out of detention, but at least we would know that you are there and would evaluate and see if there's something that can be done. On this one, the last thing I want to say is almost obvious and funny, but a lot of people don't think about this. It says, have an extra set of car and house keys available somewhere, and then give those to somebody else. Here's why. You get stopped, or ICE comes to your workplace and takes you away. Where is your car? In the parking lot. Who has access to your house? Because once you get taken into the detention center, everything you have gets locked up. You cannot get your keys out of there, and they cannot give those keys to anybody else. They cannot give your car keys to anybody else out of the detention center. But if you already had your keys copied and given to your cousin, then all we have to do is to tell the cousin, go to Northridge and drive that car out of the place, go to the house and make sure the things are okay and whatever lights turned off. So these are very simple things, but people don't think about. But when that happens, just to give you an example, when I go to visit detainees in a detention center, they don't allow me to even take my phone. We take everything out of our pockets and they put it in a locker. So really, if you had rice cooking at home when you went to work, it's going to be burning until somebody can access your house. So we are saying, just to be safe, make sure you have some of those basic things done. This is not necessarily a lawyer's job, but it makes our work much easier if we know that the house is not catching fire because you left rice burning for I don't know how long. So at this point, I'm going to let Steve take over the rest of the pillars of the plan.
Thanks.
Hi, Steve. Go ahead. You know that better than I do.
So just as a reminder, you know, if you get picked up by the government, if you get picked up by ICE, if you get picked up by the police for any reason, you're gone, right? People may not necessarily know where you are. They can't reach you. Typically, it's only lawyers who can get in there to do that. We can find somebody if we know some basic information, their name.
He's doing the ICE thing on
Yes, he is, okay. We can find you if we know name, birthday, identification information. That's why it's important to keep that in one spot. And the reason that the keys in the house are important because you will not return. If you're taken into custody, you will not return until we have some legal remedy. We go before an immigration judge, we get some reversal. You know, quite frankly, they can pick me up for immigration, and if I don't have any identification, they will hold me until I can prove who I am. Until my wife can go get a passport and I can call Henry and he can show up and show that I'm an American citizen, they'll release me. So that's why it's important to carry your identification with you. It's why it's important to have those other available keys and things like that. Because it's not just if you get picked up at work or at the mall. But we've got some of these apartment buildings that make you move your car every 48 hours. So your car you think is safely parked in the parking lot of your apartment building, when in 3 days they're going to call the towing company and you're going to start paying $60 a day to never see that car again. Okay? So some of the safety plan we talk about is taking care of those things. Now, let's see, this right? All right. I want to talk a little bit about finances. That's part of it, about the rent. And here's what you really need to do is you need to identify a specific person, a trusted person, to handle your finances, even in just the short term. All right? Now, most of us have a family and we think about how we're going to take care of our family. We think about how we're going to take care of the kids. All right? We have an idea. An idea is not a plan. All right? An idea is just a dream. It's a hope. So if you're going to do any of these things that we're recommending today, they've got to be in writing. They've got to be signed properly, and they've got to be in a form that people outside your family will recognize and honor. Because otherwise, it won't do you any good. It'll just be pretty papers in a binder. Okay? So find that trusted person. We recommend you do not use someone else who has a status problem. All right? Because what is ICE going to do? You're going to come in, and they're going to say, well, who are you? Oh, I'm his cousin. We came together to school in 2006. Oh, really? Are you still in school? And because you think you're safe, you're not thinking of this, and you're going to end up in the cell next to your cousin. All right? Do not pick people who have status problems. All right? That's very, very important. ICE is going to do the same thing that the CIA does to spies. They're going to watch everything the whole way through. We'll talk about children in a few minutes, and be sure that if you've got children in school, that ICE is going to show up in the parking lot and wait to see who comes picks up your children. Because we are now living in an environment that is aggressive and is fear-filled. And there are ICE agents that feel it's their obligation as Americans to do this. And they feel empowered to do it, and they will do it whether it's right or not. Okay? We can't afford to take those chances. So don't endanger your friends. Pick someone who's not. And I know that that's a difficulty. There are some churches that may provide some assistance, and we can work with churches as well to do those kinds of things. It's best to find a trusted friend, someone that you can trust. And what you'll do is you'll create a power of an attorney, it's called. It's an attorney in fact, not an attorney at law. We're attorneys at law. The information or the labels are confusing. But you'll designate that person to have the power to do everything that you could do. It's a very powerful document. You can specify real estate transactions, you can specify medical transactions, you can specify insurance, because all those things need to happen. If you've got a house and you're sitting in ICE and the insurance policy doesn't get paid, when that rice cooker catches on fire and the house burns down, you've got nothing. So someone needs to make sure that those bills get paid, those things happen while you're in custody, hopefully to be released or hopefully to return. And if not, then we need to think longer term of how we're going to take care of those finances so that the house can be sold and get sent to you if you get actually deported. All right? Because it's not going to do you any good if you can't return here to even take care of the sale of the house. There it is. So use the powers of attorney for your transactions. You can use them now. When I do estate planning for my clients, for married couples, I have them execute powers of attorney in favor of each other. Because if one of them ends up in the hospital and they need to cash a check, or maybe check on an insurance policy, or perhaps finish some other transaction, they can use those powers of attorney to do that. And it's particularly important for single people or people who don't have someone who can do that for them. All right? They're common documents, they're easy to use, we just don't think of them in this context. Powers of attorney. All right? Save an emergency fund. All right, this is really practical. You should do it, I should do it, we all should have an emergency fund. How much you save is going to depend on your own personal circumstances. I would say at least a month, so that you have enough money to take care of the kids, to take care of the payments, so that your car isn't taken away, your house isn't taken away, all those things happen. Emergency fund. It's that simple. And make sure that you can give someone access to that money. If you put it in a bank and don't tell your wife or your husband what bank it's in, because that's our emergency fund and I don't want you to spend it, or if you have it in cash cards and the cash cards are under a floorboard in your kitchen or tucked behind the refrigerator or frozen in the freezer, they do nobody any good. So you have to write these things down and put them in a place where the people you trust can find them. There are lots of ways that we can put money aside in a way that's safe and easy to get to. We can talk about that individually as we go through. So that's the basic financial safety plan. How about childcare? All right, you have to remember that if you're working and you get picked up, your children are going to be either at home or at school. We need to make sure that they're well taken care of. If there is nobody taking care of the children, they will become wards of the state and the government will come in and take care of them. They will treat them as neglected children. All right, and they will handle all the decisions about the children until somebody else can come and take care of them. And it will be difficult for you to say, well, I'm just going to voluntarily return to Kenya or Cameroon or wherever I'm from, and I'm going to bring my children with me. Well, now the children are in the custody of the state. You've got a social worker or somebody else making those decisions. It's what's in the best interest of those children. They may decide that it's not a good idea to go back to Liberia during the Ebola crisis, and not go back to Kenya because you're going to end up in a Somali camp, refugee camp, right? So if you want to have control over those decisions, you can't just think about them and have an idea, because an idea is not a plan. It's got to be written. So what do we do for kids? Pick, again, a trusted friend. Someone that you can give written authority to, and there are documents that'll do this. There's a special authorization of parental authority, it's called. It's recognized by the state, it's recognized by everybody. And the difficulty is this, is all the schools are what are called mandatory reporters. So if there's a teacher who learns or understands that this child is neglected, that is, they don't have a parent around anymore, they will report them to the state. If your friend comes over without that document, they will not get in the front door of that school. All the schools are secure now. They have these secure doors. You're going to go into the office and they're going to say, I want to see, Josiah. They go, who are you? I'm a trusted friend. Yeah, right. There's the door. Trusted friend. Show it to yourself. And they're not going to let you go get those kids. They will honor the right paperwork. Schools are very good about that. They want what's best for your children. The teachers truly want what's best for your children. But they're limited by what the law will let them do. All right. Give your caregiver the authority to deal with schools and doctors. We talked to power of attorney previously. We have a special, I lost the word for it, authorization for parental authority. And we could do the same thing with doctors, because a child who is under 18 cannot consent to medical treatment. Under the law, they're deemed to not be able to make that choice. So who do we go to? Someone who is their parent, or what we say under the law, who stands in loco parentis, in the place of the parent. And there's a document that does that, and if you don't have that, the state steps in and takes care of that. All right? And the difficulty, of course, is the state takes care of all kinds of dependent and neglected children. They take all kinds of circumstances, and they have no reason to know about the special circumstances of you and your life. Lastly, write down instructions for medical and special care. Write them down. You might remember them. If they're allergic to peanuts, if they're allergic to asparagus, I don't know, write that down. Make sure it's written in hopefully a book like this. Because people may remember or they may not remember what needs your children have. Okay? Let me see here. Let me not skip anything. I think that's it for this one. Okay. So that takes care of the children. If we have that documentation for the children, we know, how to get them out of school, how to deal with the meetings, because there's going to be a conference, and if somebody shows up to the parent conference and says, oh no, his parents are down in Mississippi, as Henry says, that's going to end the conversation very quickly. So have that documentation ready. So let's talk about healthcare safety. If you're in any sort of danger because of your status, make sure you carry prescription and doctor information with you. okay? It's not enough to know what your prescriptions are because that is not going to get you anything, particularly if your life depends on taking that medicine, all right? ICE isn't going to check that out for you. But what you do have to do is you do have to tell them. If you get picked up by any police department, by ICE, by anybody, if you've got an illness that requires medication, you tell them that right away. And you tell them who the doctor is. They have an obligation. You have a constitutional right, they have a legal obligation to see that you are cared for and that you receive the medicine that you need. All right? But they need to know that. So if you have an emergency, a medical situation, make sure you have that and have that available. All these things that I'm talking about should be in the book as well, so that whoever comes and grabs your book and has your information, whatever trusted friend, can find that for you. So that they can call and say, wait a second, he needs to be taking this medication because he's got a disease that's going to kill him in 3 days, or whatever it happens to be. Consider counseling for your children if you're separated. This is a tough one. This is the hardest thing for me to tell clients, because separation really injures your children. They don't understand why you're gone. They hear all the same stories we do about the terrible things that happen. You don't have a chance to communicate with them. You don't have a chance to call them. You don't have a chance to explain where you are. They don't know how to deal with that loss. And there are people, there are professionals that know how to help those children. All right? It's a very, very hard thing to admit that we need that assistance. But think about this as if you have died, as if you're no longer available to your children, and you would want them to have whatever assistance they need in dealing with that. So do consider that as part of your arrangements for your children. Okay, that's all that I have for these materials. There are, like I said, the safety plans include powers of attorney. They include the documents and the statements of authority so that people can deal with your finances, can deal with your medical condition, can deal with your children. All right, I want to let Ryan talk about employment issues there. Thank you. Bottom button.
Yep.
Oh. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's talk employment safety plan. And some of the stuff will apply. Well, actually, these are all just state laws. I'm basically updating you that will help you out. These will apply even if you're not picked up as well. So, but there you go. Okay, arrange to collect all earned wages. So, what happens if you get picked up from ICE? You get picked up by ICE, either rightfully or wrongly. Who's going to collect your paycheck? Now, maybe, perhaps you have it. Perhaps it is, direct deposit, but that may not be the case. Or if it is direct deposit, there may be parts of it that are not, it won't be direct deposit, maybe like sales commissions or something like that along those lines. What you should do, and you can write this out. Actually, let me grab a pen here. I'll show you something. All you have to do now, after you talk to an attorney, because just because you've been picked up does not mean you've lost your job, because perhaps if they can somehow get you out somehow, then you can return to your job. But if you don't, there's a good chance that you don't show up for work 2-3 days, you're going to lose your job. So, and perhaps you could have someone in your designated person in your safety plan tell them, hey, he's been picked up by ICE. So, but regardless, they're probably going to start looking for someone to fill that spot anyway. So what you can do is, it doesn't matter what it's on, but you can do an email. In Minnesota, you have the right to request your final wages once you give written notice to your employer. It could be an email. I request my final written wages be given to me. It could be, I could write it on the back of the sheet right here. You know, I request my final written wages. And as soon as Steve and Henry fire me right now, I'll just hand this to them, and they better give it to me within 20, and they better give me my wages within 24 hours. Or if they don't give me my wages in 24 hours, then the penalty time starts accruing when they do, within the 24 hours. So it'll accrue up to, if they don't, they'll have to give me an extra 15 days of my wages as well. And plus, if you hire an attorney to come and do this for you, they get, you know, if they don't pay your wages, because I could see there's definitely some employers out there who might say, well, you know, he's in custody, so yeah, we don't need to pay him. He's not going to come back and get us. Those fees have attorney's fees brought into the statute, whether it's you're only missing $50 or $10,000. You know, meaning that when you win, they have to pay your attorney their hourly fees. So as I mentioned, there's a 15-day penalty. There's a little bit of a difference between if it's a voluntary and involuntary termination. So if you're fired or not, that's why I mentioned before. If ICE picks you up, they fire you when you don't show up for the next 3 days, or you tell them you've picked up ICE and you quit. The only you can do it either way. Just the timing just is different. If you're terminated, you must do it within 24 hours. If you voluntarily resigned, they have until the next pay period, next regular pay period. Wages may include paid time off and vacation time. It depends on the employer. But I mean, the reason they finally get these wages are you might need these to pay your rent now that you're all of a sudden not working, take care of your children, hire an attorney, whatever it may be. Or just make sure it gets back to wherever you're from, Cameroon, Kenya, Gambia, wherever it may be. The next one is obtain a copy of your employment file. You can do this in the exact same letter as I wrote up before. Like I said, you can do this by mail or by email to your employer, or have someone do it for you. And just request they have it send it to you either, to whatever address you want it to be. You can have it sent to your attorney's office, have it sent to your trusted friend, have it sent to your address if you have children at home that are, or a spouse or someone who's not been picked up. The same thing is I request a copy of my personnel file. That's it. That's all you gotta say. You can have it sent to any address, because you have a right in Minnesota. This is Minnesota. So if you move to Illinois, it's gonna be a different law. These are all Minnesota state laws. But in Minnesota, you have a right to review your employment file as well during your employment as well. So, or at least every 6 months you do. So you can go to your boss tomorrow, like, I want to see my employment file. Do you need to? Probably not. But when you do, if you get terminated, especially if you think you've been terminated for any, outside of immigration, especially if you think you've been terminated for any wrongful purpose, retaliation, discrimination, something like that, always go ahead and get your personnel file, and they'll almost always send it. So,
Right?
yeah.
As lawyers, we want your personnel file,
Yep.
your employment file, because we want to know what documents the employer saw when you got hired.
That's true.
We want to know everything that ICE is going to know. We want everything to know that the immigration people are going to know about you. And that's the only way to prepare you, to give you advice on how we can get you out of custody.
Yeah, and ICE is going to request going to get those documents as well. They're going to subpoena those documents to find out if you gave a false authorization to work. Yeah, false citizenship or something like that. So beyond just, the employment aspect, the immigration aspect, we want to know what they have. That's a way for us to know. And if you do request your personnel file, when you're terminated, you must do it within 15 days of your termination, so do it right away. Like I said, if you get picked up by ICE when that termination is, it's probably going to be in a couple of days and you don't show up for work, but just send it out right away. And they must give it to you they must send it to you within 10 days. So, and don't have them send it to you at the ICE detention center. Have someone doing this for you outside of ICE, a trusted friend. The next one is, I know we talked about health insurance, is COBRA, which stands for the Consolidated Budget Reconciliation Act of 1986. What that does is if you guys are receiving health insurance from your employer, when you are terminated from your employment, well, there's several triggering events, but for today's purposes, we'll focus on termination because that's what will happen if you get picked up by ICE likely. Your spouse or your children may be covered under this health care. What you do is you have the option to continue under this health care or not. If you have the option to continue for at least up to 18 months, with some exceptions, unless somehow the people that are covered find another plan somehow, or covered under Medicare, or Medicaid, or Minnesota Care. Barring that, but the only thing is you have to pay the premiums. You now have to pay the full premium for the next 18 months, and you'd still be under the employer's plan. You now just have to pay the full premium. So you might need that for your children, your spouse, whoever else is covered under that plan. There could be more than one qualifying event, as I mentioned before. Someone dies, divorce, something like that could trigger it. And if you have children, if somehow you're not getting health care through your employer or something like that, and you will now not be able to lose your health care because you've been picked up by ICE, I would have, go to, the Minnesota, the healthcare website, Minnesota, what is it called? MNsure, yes, thank you. The MNsure website. They can, just because whether your children are citizens or whether they're not, but there's all there's so many different visa statuses and what people qualify for, Medicaid or not, and things like that. I think it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to get them covered under Medicaid, Minnesota Care. I think even undocumented children qualify for CHIPS, I believe. So just to get them set up with that, so that way they have continuing health care going forward. Also with life insurance, basically this is, life insurance is a state law. You can continue it just like you can your health care insurance. If an employer provided health care insurance or life insurance, basically under the same terms, 18 months you have to pay the premiums, and depending on where you're going to go or where you're going to be, you can make the decision of whether that's you want to continue that or not. Because it's not as much of a necessity as health insurance, but depending on where they might deport you to, or depending on the circumstances, because there's a lot of people come from a dangerous place, claiming asylum. Asylum's not granted because they can't prove they were directly targeted. Someone's directly persecuting them, but and that may provide some benefit to people left behind. Oops, I forgot to click that one. Life insurance. So I will let next one up. Is that you, Henry? Oh yeah, sorry, there's one more. Sorry, it's off my list. Yes, anti-practice employment. And this will apply even outside of immigration. Maybe there's been something that's going on at work, and having the power of attorney, this can be done. You might be, I've got clients who have been discriminated. I have one client who, I swear she was telling me, this person kept calling her, all these names, and it's like, man, I thought this person was this, older white woman Trump supporter. Just from what that's what she's telling me. And no. These are both African women. One African woman is harassing another one because she's from a different part of Africa. It was crazy. It definitely happens. But these things. If you have retaliation claims, perhaps, or wage claims, or discrimination claims, there can be some money for you or your family if you decide to prosecute them. You can't be harassed at work for being, age, gender, race, sex, all those things. So there you go.
Thank you, Ryan.
I think we have to switch the mic again.
That's up to him to decide. Is he wrong?
I'm just ahead of the game.
No discrimination.
Thank
I want to
you.
go sit down and make
He'll
it.
be the one
make it-
doing he'll be the one doing the case.
That's great.
If you discriminate against me.
Sure.
All right. One quick piece here, so we can wrap up. Just quickly, the other part of the plan that we think everyone should think about is to look at what their options may be. Just because somebody is in the red of ICE or has been arrested doesn't mean they don't have choices. So the first thing we recommend, and here we are not saying hire us, but we always like it when people hire us because we think we understand this better than a lot of people do. But we're saying just make sure you hire a law firm that can get that done. And reputable means, Beatrice, it actually means us, but there could also be others. For those people who may be unable to pay, you could get help from non-profit legal service agencies. A lot of those actually use lawyers. All of us volunteer there. So you're not getting substandard service. You just need to qualify income-wise. So if you're making money, don't try to go there because they won't let you. Come to us or to some other law firm instead. But they provide limited services. Most of them would not help you, for example, if you are in detention or things like that, but they could help fill out forms. And so those could be an option also. The other thing I was going to say is probably the most important thing I can say today. You know, with this fear that I started with the panic that is going around, guess who's also in town? Crooks and fraudsters. The people who want to take advantage of the fact that people are afraid and they are now saying, oh, I am the one who can do this, I'm the one who can fix it for you. This has been mentioned a lot, especially amongst Liberian folks who are on what's called temporary protected status, TPS. There has been, around the community, and I don't see a lot of Liberian friends here, there are people who are going around selling, because as we know, the temporary protected status for Liberia is expiring on May 21st. And there is, you know, your guess is as good as mine whether President Trump is going to extend it. You can hope for it, you can pray for it. Good luck. So there are people who are going around selling forms that people, in fact, at a session that we had just another room from here, the chief of police for Brooklyn Park said they are receiving calls of people running around selling those forms, and it's fraudulent. There is nothing anybody is going to do unless President Trump, with the advice of Steve Bannon and Jeff Sessions and what's my favorite, Kellyanne, decide to extend it. Now, so what we are saying is that as these things go, and vulnerable people are usually the ones who fall victim to this fraud. The only person, I shouldn't say, the only people who can actually represent your interests, and this is by law, we didn't create it, are licensed attorneys. Part of it is because we are required to provide confidentiality to the client. In exchange for that, we are protected from subpoena and all other powers. So If you go today and give your information to your trusted cousin can actually be subpoenaed to provide that information. That would not be the case if you provided that information to an attorney. So there's some significance in there, and that's why we charge some money. I don't think we charge enough, but we charge some money for that. So others may be required to give the information to ICE or anybody. Now, the other thing that we are telling people is stay away from unlicensed people who either don't give you a signed contract, charge you for blank immigration forms. Trust me, this one we have actually seen it, where somebody comes to our office and says, I paid $165 per form, and I said, these things are free. Even immigration itself says they are free. But people don't necessarily know that because, again, and then or somebody who suggests that they have some contacts within immigration and they would help you out. That's just classic fraud, corruption. Or somebody who's not willing to say, yeah, here is my license. If you ask me for my license right now, I'll provide it. So you should demand, if you're going to pay them, you should demand that they provide you evidence of that. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, they are free. They are free. As I finish, and I know we ran over our time, part of it is because we started late, and part of it is because some of us came late. So I'm going to wrap up with just 2 items. I want to thank all of you for being here. I hope that this helped. And as I said earlier in the beginning, our goal, if we can help one person, our mission is accomplished. We didn't have to do this. Back in our office, if you show up, we're going to charge you decent amounts of money for the same information that we offered here for free. But that's how the world works. But I want to recognize 2 people before we get done. Mr. Momanyi, I'm putting you on the spot now. Why don't you stand up, and I'm only going to give you 2 seconds to tell people about yourself and anything you want to say. Yeah.
All right. My name is Henry Momanyi. I'm one of the community people around here. And I want to thank you.
As we close, I would like to say one thing. You know, some of us have been here for a little while. And I see people that I recognize that have been here probably as long or longer than I have been. Times have changed. And I said this at Kenya Community Church the last time. I said, this is not 1999. This is not 2005. The things that people used to be able to get away with, even as late as October last year, before the election, times have changed. As you go out, do things, tell your people that it's no longer, especially if your status is not clear or not proper yet. Tell your people that it's no longer an option to drive a car that has a broken taillight. It's just a magnet for arrest. It's no longer acceptable to go to mud jacks, and I know people who do that. And get yourself happy and then get in the car and drive. You're heading. So the message that in this one, the Americans have to let me speak to my people on this one. It's no longer the situation. You cannot do what you always did before and get away with it. I have held, I mean, I've dealt with a million, no, I don't want to say a million, that would be too many. I've dealt with so many cases of people, typically it's the men, who have this idea of teaching their women lessons through physical violence. It's no longer, you cannot get away with that anymore. You may have previously when enforcement was a little lenient. It's no longer an option. All right? Other than that, thank you very much for coming by. We may, depending on whether they let us hang out here for a little bit, we may be around for a few more minutes. But like I said, this kind of ends it. The next time we meet with a lot of people, it's going to be in an environment where Mattel would give you a bill before you walk into my office or Steve's office or Ryan's office and the other attorney's office. And that is just the reality of the.
Yeah. Just a quick question because there are people who have been green cards, but for some reason, when the executive order came out, some of them they stopped even traveling out of the country because for some reason, they must have maybe they must have had domestic
Yeah, some crime. Yeah.
What can you comment because that's one of the reasons
Okay. If everyone can induct, did they say, are they going to evict us? No. All right. I can answer that. I think that's an important question. What happens in a situation like this is the panic goes ahead of the reality. The truth of the matter is the executive orders do not change the current or previous existing immigration laws. The president has no authority to alter the status of lawful permanent residents. Whatever he does or whatever he says, the initial order somehow included, and I don't know what kind of lawyers they have, but it somehow suggested that the president can strip permanent residents of staff. And the people who are not traveling, and I've had people come to me and say, should I still go? I have a ticket, should I go? And here's what you need to know or tell them. No, actually, don't tell them. Here's what you need to know. As a permanent resident who has been given the card, it's not green, but you know what I mean. You have rights that not even the president by himself can take away. So upon return, even if you have something on your personal record, so say you have a conviction for something, unless it's something that makes you inadmissible. I don't want to get too much into the immigration business, but if it's, for example, people come to me and say, oh, I have a DUI, can I still go home? Or child support, can I still go home? It has to be something that makes you inadmissible into the US. And even if that was the case, what immigration has to do is give you what's called a notice to appear, which is an appointment with an immigration judge. They cannot put you on a plane back to Zambia just because you showed up. That is the difference between a permanent resident and a non-resident or a non-immigrant, like the people without documentation. So people, but again, I don't want to give the blanket generalization. But if somebody is concerned about that, we have to look at the specifics. Because someone with one conviction of domestic assault may very well be deportable. So as soon as they come back here, they can be shipped back, while somebody else with some other minor offense may not be. So this kind of comes down to the facts of each case. So if the people asking you that, my suggestion will be Did we talk about reputable attorneys? Have them call the reputable attorneys, or better yet,